So another cloudburst today, Dad. I was thinking we'd talk what we're both talking about. We've talked a lot about emotions, but what about the subtle ways, or maybe not so subtle ways, that we express them sometimes, that they come out?
Yeah, and I was just thinking before, pleasant expectation. Looking forward to this podcast.
All right. So emotions, and how, whether or not they're good or bad, I think that we have to deal with them on a regular basis.
Emotions
as humans, yeah. And it does strike me, the verse that I come back to is, a fool gives full vent to his spirit. A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds back. And I take that to mean that we don't wear our emotions on our sleeve.
Yeah, we don't say everything that's on our mind, and we don't express everything that's on our mind, right? There's somebody's talking, they tell you about something they did, and they're really proud of you. You go rubbing your nose. You're kind of doubtful, I was thinking about all these little things we do, I want to get to the major things, but we don't want to say everything. What's that? What is that? What kind of thing do we, when we're doubtful? Oh yeah, rubbing your chin, right? If someone's
contemplation.
Yeah, contemplation. But if someone's telling you, otherwise you sort of keep your eyes open. Reading people's emotions, of course, is one of the famous places it's used is in playing poker. They call it. You want to keep a poker face, especially if you really get a good hand. You don't want to go like that. Brighten up. The other guy will know, and he won't bet against you. Right.
Right.
And so apparently, I don't play poker anymore, but there is what they call the tell. The tell, if you got a good hand, something.
A tell,
and people watch for that, and they say, "Oh, you have a tell." So we do. It's really hard to hold back our bodies from expressing our emotions. Well, we're always. People are more or less expressive. I try to be expressive because I like people to laugh, and a lot of times I'll do things just to get people to laugh, express surprise. That's a number, surprise.
Yeah. Well, do you know that there's a doctor, Dr. Paul Ekman, I think his name is. He did his whole life's work was on micro expressions, and there was there was a show that they made called Lie to Me about how they made some kind of agency that could tell when you were lying, that worked with the CIA. But this guy was a real guy who he mapped out. And one of the two that really struck me was disgust, raising your nose like this, disgust. It's just, and surprise, your eyebrows going up like that. And then also when we are not confident in what we're saying, our body will just, something about our arm, will make an arm movement. Stuff like that. And like you said, touching your face, when someone's touching their face, they're not confident in what they're saying.
Yeah. I was thinking, these are all kind of little things that come up, but not the major emotions. But one thing is a fear, especially as kids, fear. I had my brother Mark lives across the street from me, and in later days, my brother Mark could probably bend me in two and tie me into a pretzel. But when I was a kid, we were kids, I think I must have beat up on him a little bit or pushed him around, because I remember when I was in my late 20s, Mark was over here at the house, and I was here visiting Mom and Dad. And I came up to Mark and said, "Mark," and Mark went like that. Why? Because when I was a kid, I used to sometimes hit him or something, And so for years, Mark would do like that when I came around, and it made me feel bad.
Yeah,
but this is a reflex of fear, right? A fear.
Yeah.
Like this, hands up.
Yeah.
If you go into a dark house and there's a knock and a bump, you might put your hands up like this, which is good, defensive.
But what we're talking about is how our body. Paul Ekman talks about the autonomic response mechanisms of our body.
Oh yeah,
and
things that we don't make ourselves do.
Right,
it's just automatic. And the one we landed on quickly. The one we landed on right quickly is laughter. The problem with laughter is we really don't control it. That's not a problem. That's actually it's automatic,
Yeah,
it's automatic. You don't control it. You may go, well, that's really, you do that and you're really going to let somebody know you don't think that's very funny.
Right. The forced laugh. Yeah.
But really real laughter is automatic. Is a response to something that surprise. It's surprise, right? Surprise. That and surprise that you get something.
Yeah.
If someone has gotten something that is hidden and revealed it, a weakness in people. That's what we laugh at. A weakness in people. The most famous act that is famous way of getting laughter is called the pratfall. Where comic Johnny Carson did it until he injured his back. He would come out and fall down, and people always laugh at that. And they laugh at it because I don't know, just it's funny. You laugh at people being weak. You laugh at yourself being weak, and somebody discovers some weakness in you. And in kindness, if they're being kind and they kind of find that, you can get some really good laughs out of it. I remember Uncle Tim Stein, he said he knew that I was collecting coins at the time. Okay. And he said, you get those coins out and look at them, don't you? I said, well, yeah. He said, you get at them and look at them, don't you? And feel them, And he caught me and we started laughing, and he picked at something that was kind of true. And we started laughing, and then, boy, we got into one of those laughs that you can hardly breathe,
Yeah.
But that is, I think, laughter at one particular point, with heavy laughter, is exposing the humanity of where we are. Like we are at sometimes just weak to the whole world. We can't help anything. We are weak,
vulnerable,
very vulnerable, and the vulnerability we laugh. But what talking about laughter brought us to was what kinds of expression of emotion are in the Bible, and most especially what kinds of emotion does God show, or Jesus? What kinds of emotion does Jesus show? And laughter in the Bible is not in the majority of cases, not exclusively, but in the majority of cases, laughter refers to derision, laugh to scorn. And that phrase actually is used a lot, laughing to scorn. They laughed at Jesus on the cross. They laughed at Jesus when he said, y'all get out of the room here. We want to see this girl. She's not dead. She's sleeping, right? They were mourning. And he said, y'all, I'll stop that. Go out of the room. And they laughed at him. Laughing derision. And it says that God laughs in derision. When the nations disapprove of God or rebel against God, laughs at them in derision. Psalm 2, the second Psalm. So usually that, but yet, this where Jesus says, blessed are you who mourn now, for you will laugh. So he's setting up that the contradiction between mourning and laughing. If you mourn now, that if you're waiting for the kingdom of God, you realize that this world is not right. You're waiting for the kingdom of God. Your hopes will be fulfilled and you will laugh. That's laugh. And whereas the other example of a good laugh is both Sarah and Abraham, back in the Old Testament, laughed when God told them that they were going to have a child in their old age. Sarah laughed kind of because she laughed like a woman would laugh, because it was a signal that she was going to have sexual relations. She says, "How can I have fun, basically, with my master?" Well, at this age, she laughed. Abraham laughed when God said, "You're going to inherit this country," and he says, "And all of your descendants you're going to have them as the sand of the sea, as the stars in the sky." And Abraham fell down and laughed. Jesus,
but they both got punished for it in some ways, right? I mean,
Jesus. The angel said of Sarah, "You laughed, didn't you?" And she said, "Oh no, I didn't laugh." Which, you didn't believe me, right? You laughed that it couldn't be true. So he took it sort of, she didn't believe. But when Abraham laughed, Jesus referred to that. And I don't have the reference, but Jesus once said, "Abraham saw my day and rejoiced." Abraham, and I believe it's when God said, "You're going to be a blessing out of your loins. Your seed will bless the entire world." Talking about Jesus. And Abraham laughed. He saw my day and rejoiced. So it's there. Laughter is referred to 2 or 3 times in a good way. But generally, it's laughing. We want to watch laughing because we tend to laugh at people and not always with people.
Well, and there's two things come to mind as you're talking. Scott Adams said, to the beginning point, you said that it's something that comes out of us naturally. He said that when you're talking to a big group of people and they clap, that's one thing, but that's a very intentional and almost like like a fake laugh. Right. But when they laugh, when a group of people laughs, then you have said something right. Of course, unless they're laughing at how bad you're doing, I suppose. But even then, a lot of comics talk about how difficult it is when you get into that place where people won't even laugh at you because you're doing bad. They just are sort of bored. Or
they say that's the worst place to be on stage, and to make people laugh, and they don't laugh.
Trying to make people laugh.
They say you have flop sweat. That is, you're sweating.
But then the other thing, so as far as it being a good thing or a bad thing, laughter, we do have to be careful, I think, because we talked a little bit about how when we laugh, we're not serious. It's not out of a place of seriousness. Now, rejoicing can be serious, but generally it's a small part of that rejoicing, right? Rejoicing is much more
and Paul says, St. Paul says, don't be jesting, getting people to laugh all the time, and that's, I tend to be like Groucho Marx. I'm listening to people when they talk saying, how could you make a pun out of that and get somebody to laugh? You got to watch that, because you can, when you do that, you often can hurt people's feelings without knowing it, but the main thing is gravity. The Bible, the New Testament, the kingdom of God, it's not about sadness so much, but it is about gravity. It's a grave situation. It's a serious situation. Sober. People are going to hell. People are making decisions about God all the time. And laughter, I think it relieves the situation, but we don't want to just be living with laughter all the time. It does not elevate the level of conversation.
Well, and when you mention those verses that talk about laughter in a positive way, it does strike me that the verbiage uses it as a way, because you can't laugh when you're mourning. They're not necessarily opposites, but they are mutually exclusive. Like when somebody is mourning, laughter would be very chaotic. It would be crazy.
It would be so out of place. People would say, I mean, the opposite of, like, if you could put these expressions, opposite of laughter would be crying. When you cry, you can't make yourself cry. Some people can make themselves cry, actors, but generally you cry because the emotion wells up in you. Now we know that Jesus did cry. It said famously, the shortest verse in the King James Bible, Jesus wept. He cried. He sobbed, and because, well, we take it because he was mourning with the rest. He identified with everyone because everybody else was crying. They were mourning. His friend had died. He died. Even though he knew he was going to raise him from the dead, he had died, and he would die again. And Jesus, I think the whole question of death was on him, and that Jesus was going to suffer and die too. And it just came to him, and he cried.
Well, and I think there is something about both crying and laughing. The autonomic response that we have is to a breaking of reality. There's something in reality that shifts fast, and death is one of those. I think everybody feels sort of a lack of control and just the cosmic shift in
something
death.
New.
It's like it's weird magic, and laughter. Usually we'll laugh at some shift in going from the opposite, going from down or scared or apprehensive to it's relief. We've talked before about comedy and relief, and it's a shift.
Anger can be like that too, and anger can express itself in many ways. I think generally raising your voice. The most common in the world is cursing, and even the disciple Peter. I don't know if everybody knows this, but the third time that they asked him, they said, "No, Jesus is now in the judgment, being judged by the high priest and so on." And that night that he was betrayed, he went in to the judgment hall, and there Peter is outside, and the girl's outside by the fire. And he said, "You were with Jesus." "Oh no, I wasn't." He denied it, but the third time, I think it was a man said, "No, you were with Jesus because you talked like a Galilean." They had a certain kind of dialect, like a down east dialect here,
accent,
Hoy-toy, had an accent, and it said he cursed and swore, which I think most of us guys have in weak moments, have cursed and swore. Anger can come out like that. Anger and frustration. Frustration is you lose control of the situation. You're out changing a tire, and the lug nut, gets jammed on it, and you can't get it off. So, what can you do? And I got a call, and something happens, and it just, and that's, of course, when the Christian needs to pray. But it's the common thing is kind of curse or to shout. Another thing is to bang your fist on the table when you're talking to someone. "I'm not going to do that." He banged your fist. There's an emotional, tell right there.
Well, one of the things that brought this up was I think you were talking to my sister, your daughter Evangeline, about sighing, right? Sighing. Yeah,
sighing, and that's a lot in the Bible about sighing.
Well, I'm curious about that because it's funny that I don't know why, but I think our family is sort of sensitive to sighing when we hear, and so when I hear it in my kids or my wife, it says everything okay. They always sort of check me and say, "Why? I'm just sighing." But I do think that there's something revelatory about a sigh, because in all these things, it is a reaction to a feeling in our body and a release, right? Some sort of relief. So it may be that we are sighing because we just ran and we were holding in our breath, but
we're talking about going.
Yeah.
Why would we do that? In the Bible, it is almost exclusively related to moaning or groaning under a burden. Someone's carrying or a release. Like wanting a release from a burden. Jesus sighed. How long will you? He sighed and said, "How long do I have to put up with you?" That's what he sighed. How long? A burden. He would sigh. And the sigh that I don't quite get is where they brought to Jesus a man who couldn't hear and couldn't talk, deaf and dumb. And Jesus took him aside and licked his fingers and put them in his ears, in this man's ears. And he sighed.
Jesus sighed.
Yeah. And looked up to heaven and said to the ears, "Open, Ephphatha, Ephphatha." What that sigh was like.
I wonder if a sigh in general, maybe a groan has to do with consternation, but maybe a sigh in general is just a weariness. So like it's not as bad
weariness.
Weariness, yeah. And it's not as bad as crying something broke, but it's a general acceptance of some things.
It's going to continue on.
Yeah,
it's going to continue on. I think with Jesus, it was how long will I have to suffer this world? Things,
Well, what if
he says,
it sounds a little selfish, though. Well, what if?
No, I mean, he says several times they bring him this boy, epileptic boy. After he comes down from the Mount of Transfiguration, he sees all these people. They come running to him, and they bring him this boy. And they say he's epileptic. He throws himself in the fire. It falls down, and he foams in the mouth. And he says, "Your disciples couldn't heal him."
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, how long will I have to suffer, put up with these people?"
Well, but I wonder if there's a slight difference in maybe the language doesn't capture it. Seems sort of whiny for him to say it that way. I wonder if there is an aspect of it where he's saying, "How long will I have to see the world suffer like this? See people suffer like this?"
Well, actually, he actually says in a couple of places, "I have a baptism to go through, and I'm really straightened until I go through it." So he suffered under the load of the oncoming torture and everything in the world, and how he had to pay for it. And I would hate to say that Jesus ever whined, but he did sigh. And the sigh in the Old Testament, it says that the people of Israel sighed under the oppression in Egypt. They sighed and they groaned. The sighing. I think generally, it's not like sadness. Where sadness is something is gone, you can't fix it. Sighing is I'm putting up with. I'm putting up with. How long will I put up with it?
Yeah.
Well, so it happens, and people say Jesus sighed.
Well, and then I guess the last thing I wanted to touch on, and I think this is what sort of brings it together, is the way that Jesus, what I was reading is that Jesus used emotions. He was intentional about his emotions. They were synchronistic with his work. And so when he showed compassion by healing, he showed physical compassion with his healing, maybe during that sigh, he's fulfilling his mission to alleviate suffering. and reveal God's care for people. And when he weeps for Lazarus, his mission is showing empathy for human grief. But I mean, not just performative, but he's participating in it, you know? And so I'm sure he actually felt those, but it was also, he wasn't just willy-nilly with his emotions, right? Like,
no, I mean, everything. I mean, I think we should look at Jesus. We should look at Jesus and see everything that he did helps us to understand his feeling that he was a man like we are. Yeah. And some of those emotions we get to remember, some of those gestures, expressing emotion, are gestures of love. You know, the one sweet one is when a leper, early on in his ministry, a leper, you know, we don't really have an idea of how terrible leprosy was and how nasty. And if you can think of the person that had the worst disfigurement come up to you, and they were supposed to stay away. They were filthy, and you could catch leprosy. And the leper came up to him and said, Lord, if you want to, I can heal you. I mean, if you want to, you can heal me. And Jesus says, I want to. And he put his hand on the leper. You know, I want to. He touches him. And that's love. I mean, he didn't grab him and embrace him, but that would have been kind of over the top.
Overkill.
But in those days, you weren't supposed to get even within within speaking distance of them. They would out, you know, unclean, so you could get away from them. And Jesus put his hand on them. You know?
Well, and I think it takes immense. He was a human and was able to use even his emotions, these autonomic responses, to use them and not control them, but they were all sort of synchronistic with his mission. And I think it's important for us not to ignore emotions, just to be non-emotional, but to have that. We've talked a lot about sort of having that awareness of the kingdom and our participation in it, even as we're doing it. So we're not just reacting all the time, but we're being proactive and thinking about how our emotions are fitting in with our ministry.
Yeah. Actually, our emotions, we should be watching ourselves. And if we're sighing and groaning, like I have been recently with my back pain, groaning, I think, why am I groaning so much? You know, it's not a very good confession, you know. We want to have, watch our expressions, because it will reveal what our real emotions are. And our emotions, though they are automatic, can reveal how we need to change our, and our posture toward God. Well, because we can, with prayer and self-denial, we could enter into hope, into faith, into love. You know, these things are, if you open up your heart to God, and the Spirit can change your attitude. You don't live as a prisoner to anger and to that feeling of, oppression or sadness. You know, you can come out of all that. Right?
Watch ourselves. I think that's good. Watch ourselves.
See what it is. Now we have, so that we want to be able to. I was thinking, what is this? What is it? We lift our hands and worship. Amen. And I was thinking also, last little thought, when Jesus told people, when he told the man they put down through the ceiling, rise up and walk. Right? Did he put his hand out like that? I always think, I see Jesus going, rise up and walk. I don't see him just talking. Rise up and walk. And as a sort of a signal of authority, something like that. But we want to have more of those, and signals of love, signals of worship, and signals of hallelujah, truth, all of those. But if we sigh, and if we hear somebody else sighing, that helps us to know it's time to step in and give a helping hand.
Amen.
Right? Amen.
Yeah.
Let's see
Amen.
who's been here.
Well, we've got Troy Lee and Paul McNeil. Paul says, oh, he left a message. He said, encouraging conversation. Thanks, Paul. Wish you were here. But he's out there working hard. And we had several people. If you are watching and you disagree with us, leave a comment. If you agree with us and like what we're having to say, but have
just don't
something
shake
to
your
add.
head and groan or sigh. Oh, those guys. Leave a comment.
Yeah, and thank you for those who have, or just leave a thumbs up or a heart, and we'll know that you're watching.
Amen.
Thank you, and we will see you next week.